Hello, and welcome to this next series of our podcast. This is the Mental Health and Activism episode with Alex Seghers, who is the Director of Education for Louisiana Right to Life and my former co-director of youth programs there. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you for having me. You mean co-queens.
Yes, the co-queens are reunited on this
Yes.
special episode in the mental health series. You were one of the first people I thought of for this series, even though you don't have a background in clinical psychology. I don't even have a background in clinical psychology. I just have the psychology, the one degree. But when I was thinking about this series and like lived experiences and how important those lived experiences are, I thought of you because of how much we went through together. So thanks for coming on the pod, Alex.
Absolutely. Yeah. Whenever you asked me, I texted back, "Are you sure? Because I don't have I don't have any professional knowledge. Just kind of practical."
Just practical. No, I think that's very valuable. Why don't we start with the early activist days? Because you have a longer reigning activist history than I do. So can you please tell us how you got involved in activism? And of course, tell all the background with Louisiana Right to Life that you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, by longer activist days, we started at Louisiana for Life around the same time, but I guess I was so deeply involved in the pro-life stuff like as a kid, really. When I was in high school, my family and the youth group that I was a part of really took the pro-life movement or the pro-life issue and made it a priority to talk about. So that's definitely first. I mean, I was hearing it from my youth ministers, from my parents, like at the pulpit at our church, anywhere in my community. Whenever people come from other backgrounds are like, oh, we never talked about it at our church. That was not the case with my community growing up. Like education was pretty thorough. And then they sent me to the youth retreat that Louisiana for Life puts on. And so I was, I think, in ninth or 10th grade. I went on this youth retreat. And the only thing I can, because you're just involved in so much in high school and we're so far removed at this point, like I remember the retreat in generality, and obviously it all touched my heart in different ways. But the only thing I concretely remember is my now boss Ben Clapper giving the pro life persuasion talk, like walking through all the tactical, the logical, the compassionate like ways to have a conversation with a person. And I just
Mhm.
remember thinking, wow, I would love to be able to do that. Not only be able to like talk with people in the way that he was teaching us to, but to be able to teach others to do the same. I just thought that was so cool. That really sparked my intentional involvement, I think, in the pro life movement. And I just knew I left that weekend with the calling on my heart to be involved in pro life leadership in some way because that youth troop does a good job. As we know, we
Mhm.
do a call to leadership. We hand over a commissioning gift. At that time, it was a brick. I think they've returned to bricks
They
now.
have. I've heard that. I've heard that actually. Yeah.
Which great for them. I was like, all right, you thought that was cool enough to bring it back, Gen Z. Great. And it was a brick because we were like,
Tearing down the wall.
whatever, tearing down the walls of the culture, the culture of abortion whatever has built. And it was cool because you got your brick from tearing it down the wall. Thank you,
Mhm.
Chris. Joined the pro life club in college. We also had gotten already started with a pro life club in high school. I did that all throughout college, did different positions. I interned with Louisiana Right to Life one summer before graduation. And then right after graduation, the youth programs director position opened up where I met Krista during the interview
Yes, we
process.
did. We met during, I guess it wasn't called PLI then, the Leadership
Right.
Institute.
Right.
We did. We were interviewing there in Baton Rouge together or separately. And
Separately.
I think I remember correctly. I interviewed first, and
Yeah.
Cisco came out and told you, careful, the last girl came out crying, which I did.
Yes, you
And
did.
he was like maybe messing with you, but I actually was crying in the interview. So once we interviewed, what happened after that, Alex?
I mean, for me, in my mind, I remember being like, hi, like shaking hands and saying good luck or something like that. Because we were both sitting in
Oh yeah,
on a
there was a talk.
lecture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
on the third part of your production.
You know what I remember all these years later is that you got married and then I wasn't invited to your wedding because I had
Right.
just met you that one time,
Oh, right.
but
Yes.
it still hurts because we became so close after that. So, well, yeah, you got
Yes.
hired first. You got
Yes.
hired first, and then I got hired a little bit later after some time. And then we
Yes.
were the first ever co-directors at Louisiana Right to Life, which was so good.
It was
for the
so good.
state, that we were able to take different kind of regions and do that together.
Well, their youth programs had grown so big, it just
Mhm.
it needed to be split, which is a wonderful thing. And then we bonded a lot over being
Drink a
hired
lot of tea.
together and being thrown being thrown in the same room after not knowing each other, but for a week in DC in the cold and with all the mishaps happening.
Yes, I remember, yeah, our first events together was definitely a learning process for us. And
Mhm.
I was excited to work with teenagers, but I guess I hadn't really done that in that kind of profound of a way until this job. And I really didn't do any activism before this either, what I call minimal activism on my college campus. But it wasn't until diving into Louisiana Right to Life that I was able to kind of consider myself an activist, taking a stance against this issue that I'm very passionate about, that people know my story, how abortion affected my family. And really, it was like as it was unfolding and as we were doing all this work, it was quite the toll on our
Yeah.
lives. You know, when I think about mental health and activism, I don't know that I had any concept of that in those early days. I just saw it as, you know, you have a heart for a mission and you do everything that you can. And even when one of my former bosses, Katie Austin, told me, like, you can't save every baby, like, even when she told me that, I didn't like want to believe her. Like, I wanted to believe that I could do everything I could in all of my power to make all the change that I possibly could do. And unless I was working that hard at the mission, then I wasn't doing enough. And that's how it felt to me. I don't know if you resonate with that. Was it the same?
Definitely. And I think going into this, so like, I just described my whole history with starting in pro-life activism. Obviously, it was very young. And I'm trying to think, and it's interesting walking through it now, like what are the roots of how I approached this activism starting out? And I could see the way that I approached it, being first hired at Louisiana to Life, it's very easy to see that I was already like that in college and in high school. This is something that I think you and I really relate on is that we're like high overachievers, oldest daughters,
Mhm.
care a lot. We have huge hearts. Like, I think our personalities are just very, very mission driven. We want to work hard for the things we care about, put others before ourselves. And that's not necessarily to toot our own horn, it's just like that's just the kind of mentality, my kind of mentality that we were raised in for better or worse, like maybe in different extremes. But I think that definitely carries over into the heart that we had for pro-life activism, and it makes sense because and especially when I was at that retreat, I think in high school, I was basically told, like, "If not you, who? And if not now, when?" And that while I love, love, love that phrase, and I certainly use it, I was like, "Oh, if I'm not doing something now, 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 like, and it's not me, then I'm failing, and then I could cause the pro-life movement to fail because of that." All my college years show just how just how overachieving I was and how anything that I did, like, I would throw my whole body and soul into it. It would take away from the care for myself. I just had no sense of that. I just had no sense of boundary and self-care and putting limits on things and balancing out things. My time management was also pretty poor. That's something I really had to develop over my time at Losing It to Life. So all of that together kind of creates a recipe for putting your mental health, I guess, on the back burner when doing something that you love.
A lot of times they're kind of measuring how anxious you are, how depressed you are based on how it affects your daily life. Are you able to feed yourself? Are you able to shower? Are you able to sleep well? And if the answer is no to any of those, then it's affecting your wellness, because those basic needs have to be met and things have to be, you know, extra on top of that almost.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a clinician. I cannot diagnose people, but just in my own time with my therapist, like that's the question she's asking me, like, how much is this affecting your XYZ? And that's kind of been a good mile marker or yardstick for me to kind of measure how much I'm doing with like activism or now ministry. And is that affecting, you know, my eating habits, my sleeping habits? And for folks like us who are like givers, I do think it's very oldest child. And there are good parts of that. Givers have to be told, like, you have to take care of yourself.
Yes.
So sometimes people take too far this like self care
Yeah.
mentality for sure. But I think for us, like, Yeah, I don't know how much we were like, and it's definitely different too. If you're hosting a youth camp, there might be some lost sleep for sure.
Yes.
But in your day to day, all the time, if you're like never getting a good night's rest, or like, yeah, there's definitely been times where I'm tossing and turning over an issue that I really can't control. To lose sleep over it, for it to consume all of my thoughts all of the time, that's
Mm.
whenever it's like too far.
It makes me think of why do we put ourselves through that? Why did we not think of the daily self care? And it just made me think, well, growing up in my community and then in the pro life movement, also, you're constantly taught about these heroes of the past who did so much in the face of so much adversity. If you're Catholic, you look at the saints who gave up a lot, sacrificed a lot, went without sleep or eating or, lived through fear, just a lot of different austere things. And then you look at social activists and like Martin Luther King, and we talk about William Wilberforce and like all these other people who've just really bent over backwards for their issue. And often what's highlighted is like the physical aspect of that, the emotional aspect of that. And you like see the toll that it took on them. And so I think it's easy for us to think like, oh, they did it. Like that's what we need to do. Now, I think if we were to go back and look at that, like, sure, we would have been like, "Hey, like, have more self-care for yourself."
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of what they went through, it was external experiences that put that on them, like
Mm-hmm.
austere there's a lot of self-sacrifice, obviously, with, like, the saints and religious life and whatever. But for a lot of people, they entered into spaces where then they had to neglect themselves in some way. For us, like, if we're not eating, we're not sleeping, it's not that we're required to do
Mm-hmm.
that, and it's not that we're faced with that adversity in the immediate to do that. That's just like, "Oh, we're just doing this to ourselves, inflicting it upon ourselves," when that's not
Mm-hmm.
exactly what we're being called to do. I don't know. That's just what came to mind.
Well, and even you bringing up the heroes situation, like all the people in my early activism days that I used to look up to, I now have criticism for.
Yes, same.
It's not like, oh, you're bad and you're evil. It's not
No.
black and white like that. But I will say that this is something that I had to learn, and I don't know that every activist learns this. So I'm just going to say it. It's that I'm totally replaceable. I'm totally replaceable. And if I think that any part of the movement hinges on me, that's my pride. I'm full of myself a little bit if I really think that.
Savior
Learned.
complex.
Savior complex, indeed. And I really had to learn how to let go of parts that I can't do anymore. And there's still a lot of things. I spoke at a pregnancy center banquet today, and I still do those things from time to time. But to think that I'm the only person who can do the kind of work I'm doing, maybe to some degree, yeah, that's true because I'm a unique individual in the eyes of God.
Right.
But good activism is passing it on and letting the young people take it into their hands. So, kind of like on that note, I feel like I've changed over the last 8 years or whatever that I've been doing activism. So, what for you has changed in your activism, and how do you think maybe you are more mentally healthy or more well in your choices for activism now?
Well, one story I remember that's so starkly different than who I am now is whenever we were running one of our like first or second or so weekend retreats together. We were telling the students like, "Oh, if you're in this area, you contact Alex. If you're in this area, you contact Krista. We're your resource. We're here for you. We're here to help your pro-life club. We're here to help you answer difficult questions, put you in touch with the right people, yada yada." I was like, "Yeah, like, contact me anytime." And you said, "Oh, don't contact me after 10 PM." Like you're like, "I'm gonna be in bed." And
That's
it's
hilarious.
just yes, which is great. Like, and I remember in that moment, it didn't strike me as like, "Oh, she's not there 24/7 for them." It didn't strike me in that moment like that at all. It was just like, "Huh." Like, that's different
Yeah.
than what I'm saying. And it was fun. Like, we set it up in front of the kids, we played it off, and it was great. It wasn't like any attack on the either. It was just
Yeah.
like, I don't know. It turned into a joke and it was great.
Yeah.
But those years that I was like that when I made myself available anytime when I thought and when it consumed me, and then when I spoke that into existence and let others know that I'm available anytime, like, that was taking a huge toll on me that I denied for a very long time. And I did have students talk to me late at night. I did have students email me late at night, and then, like, whenever I was finally getting burnt out and everything, people were upset that I wasn't responding, even though it was even if I was still responding well within 24, 48 business hours,
Mhm.
which is understandable because I set myself up to be that way. That's the picture of, I guess, my first 3 years at Louisiana Right to Life. And I think by the third year, I learned a lot. I also learned that my heroes were humans, just like me. Going through that, I learned a lot more time management and professional skills that just like helped along the way. But I think the most significant thing for me was when I became pregnant, my first baby, and gave birth to that baby.
Mhm.
And suddenly I realized, oh, especially for the maternity leave and right afterward, I'm like, I have to drop everything. Like the rest of the world literally does not matter. What matters most right now is keeping this baby alive. And I think every new mother can attest to that drastic change that
Mhm.
happens whenever you have your first baby and you're like, "Oh my god, this is this changed my entire world." It made me have to like full on stop and put boundaries in place by force, by necessity that I
Mhm.
didn't have before, if that makes any sense. The biggest thing in that, while pro-life activism is certainly a calling and will always be a calling for me, I realized that it was not my number one vocation or number one purpose in life. My number one purpose, obviously there's myself and God, but like on earth, I'm here to be there for my children. And even that includes a lot of self-care. And especially with my children, they have such high needs. And I've learned through them that I need to fill my cup in order to fill theirs. And it really took me like having that complete drastic 180 change to realize that that needs to spill over in the rest of my life if I was going to even survive and and do all this and continue to be a working mom. I couldn't talk to other people or students at 10 p.m. at night. I'm nursing a baby.
Yeah.
I have to sleep right now because my baby's finally sleeping. Difference.
Yeah, and it doesn't take away from the love that you have for the work or for the
Right.
activism. I think puts it into better perspective maybe, or it prioritizes life better. And I will always be thankful for my early 20s and all my time at Louisiana Right to Life when my number one thing was like advancing the pro-life mission. I won't regret that. And I won't regret any of those sacrifices that I made. But at the same time, it's not sustainable to just always give of yourself 100% of the time. I feel like I knew that to some degree, even without being a mother. And I tried to implement good boundaries with things, but it was definitely hard. It was hard to do that
Yes.
because it can make you feel like you just don't care, which is I don't know, like the worst for me. I don't like to feel like I don't care.
Yeah. I don't like people to feel like I'm not doing enough. I don't like to feel like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah, that's such an overachiever kind of mentality. And to me, like I know I derived a lot of my identity from
Mhm.
the good work that I did. I loved that people didn't know my name but knew me as purple hair pro life girl. Like
Yeah.
a turning point was actually like at a I don't know at a PLI or something, and I like pulled out the guitar and sang, and people didn't know that I sang. And they're like, "Wow, I didn't know you played guitar. Oh, wow, I didn't know you sang." And before pro-life activists, people used to know me as the, musician and the dancer and the person who does musicals. And so for like a whole group of people to not know a pretty big part of who I was, that was kind of like a reality check for me too. Like, and I think even one time a student, they saw me with my sister and they said, "Wow, I just can't picture you with anyone else. I just see you as by yourself all the time and alone."
Wow.
And it's
Uh-huh.
again this reality check. Like you can't even picture me in the context of a family
Yeah.
or in the context of music or the arts. Like this is crazy. And it was these kind of conversations that made me rethink, oh, is this too much? Like am I doing too much in this part of my life that I'm not
Uh-huh.
that everything else is on the back burner all of the time?
And it's not a bad thing. It's just kind of the reality of it. Like they weren't knowing you for you. They were knowing you for like your productivity,
Hmm.
basically, what you were giving, but nothing about what you were receiving. I think that's remarkable.
Yeah.
And it's like that's what happens in a job. That's okay. Like everybody around us isn't meant to know us for who we are. Like this are specific people. But then yeah, you're right. Like that's such a revelation of where you're prioritizing your
Yeah.
energy and your passion and your care. And so with that, with the drastic change in my own life that made me just go like full stop, like rubber on the road, like literally the tires screeching.
Hmm.
I'm trying to remember those hazy first days of like that first year of having that baby. And so much of it, there was a shift in aura, even at our office. And I
Hmm.
won't go into details about that. Even in our very pro life office, some older people got weird about me having a baby, having to pump every day, having to attend to the needs of this baby if like my daycare plans fell through. Things that I
Hmm.
already I like the disclaimer is I already discussed this ahead of time with my boss. Like everything was good to go. Like I knew my rights and everything. I knew like I had communicated all that and I was communicating it well,
Yeah.
but people got weird and then my feelings got hurt and I didn't know who to talk to. And when I talked to my boss a year later, things were finally cleared up and that was great. And now I'm on my third baby at the same organization and things have been so much better. All that aside, there's specific changes that I'm implemented over time. And I think a lot of that comes from, like I keep saying, by necessity. Like by necessity, when I'm at work, that's where I did my work because once I got home, I was caring for my baby and then probably finally caring for myself as well. And I didn't have the same kind of time to just bring work home
Hmm.
or eat dinner and then do some more writing in bed or answering emails in bed. That just was non-existent. By necessity, I had to time manage so much better, do my work at work, be a mom and myself at home. And a lot of what that ended up coming down to is practical things where eventually I turned off all notifications on my phone besides like the obvious like text messages and phone calls and maybe a couple of things here and there. But I could not see I had my email open at work all day. My email was closed when I got home, unless I got a text that said, "Hey, I have an urgent email for you to read," which guess what? That rarely ever happens.
Hmm.
The emails I sent were not as urgent as I thought they were,
Hmm.
beforehand. Boundaries ended up working themselves out really well that way. If my work wasn't in front of me and yelling at me through the little bubble notifications, it wasn't urgent. It wasn't
Hmm.
a need now. I can pick that back up when I enter the office the next day. That was a huge change for me in just that small little decision of turning my notifications off. And that changed the reality of what I needed to respond to. I learned that I really needed that time to recover, after running a weekend retreat or running a weekday conference or working late. I needed that time to recover. I'm gonna go late into the office the next day. Again, this was all communicated to me ahead of time that I could do this and I wasn't taking advantage of it.
Hmm.
So I did start to use quote unquote comp time. It
Hmm.
wasn't something that was official at the time. It's more official in our handbook now, probably because people started actually using it and there needed to be parameters.
Yeah.
That was also very significant in itself. I don't need to rush in before 9 a.m. the next day if I've worked until midnight. Things can wait for me to rest and be my best self when I do come in. My to do list doesn't need to be unending. I can have a very specific one day and a specific one the next day. Such small practical things that I implemented. I'm trying to think of like if there's any more practical things I implemented like that. But over time, as I was doing that, after my second baby, I was promoted to manager of the youth programs team. All the things that Krista and I improved upon, everything I got to like be a part of actually handing that down to like the people who came after us, and that was wonderful. Like I say, like, okay, comp time, whatever, all of that was communicated, but I knew my attitude as a young activist, as a young person in their 20s, that I was not like I remembered my old self not taking advantage of it because I wasn't given permission to over and over again. And it's like I felt like I needed the permission to do that over and over again, which now at the age that I'm at and the experience that I'm at, I can give that permission to myself.
Mhm.
I don't think I was mentally capable of giving myself that permission at that age. Which makes sense because you just came out of school. You just left your parents. Like there's a lot of other reasons why you might not be like willing to give yourself that permission outside of like personality and drive. It's just what you know. And so it was a wonderful opportunity to be a manager of up and coming youth programs directors who were just coming out of college, and for me to not only give them, the skills and the training needed for the position, but for me to give them permission to take care of themselves.
Mhm.
And I think and I hope that we've resulted in a much healthier, younger staff who have stayed, I think, longer than others maybe have because of that. Same as being on this podcast. It's just something I hope to continue giving that
Yeah.
younger generation the
Yeah,
permission to
definitely.
take care of yourself.
Yeah, definitely. I would say as we're kind of getting to the close of the interview here, I definitely have seen you
Yeah.
with our successors, I guess, how you've managed them and you were able to give them things that we didn't have. So cool to see like that these experiences that we had as youth programs directors, co-directors, co-queens, there was something that we learned from it that we just wanted to give to them. And you've had me speak there like with the team and everything. And again, there's this element of not just in activism. I think, when like even today when I was speaking at the luncheon, they were all like, "Oh, we need, young people to like you to do this." And I said, "And we need, folks like you who like paved the way for us." Like it's
Yeah.
so important what y'all have done. And I can see too that they're like, oh, we can't like, hit people over the head with the pro-life message. And like there has to be a persuasive element of it. And like I can see them growing as activists even now with their gray hairs, and I hope when I have gray hairs that I'm going to be willing to still learn from the younger generation and to have that openness to them for their particular like new way to share this and to perpetuate the messages and like passing the torch in a way. Like there's so many kind of beautiful elements of activism, that to know that there is that communal element and there's history and there's generations. And like I feel like I didn't truly appreciate that in my time at Louisiana Right to Life. I knew we had like we were some people's legacy. I knew that part of it, but now to be like, I guess we're moving along down the line. Like now I have a legacy at with Pulse, and
Yeah.
we have a legacy through Louisiana Rights Life too. Part of history that we were there for, like through all the times that we went to the Supreme Court. And it's just interesting as you get older. And for me getting into 30s, my question for you with all of that, you and I will always be oldest sisters. And so I'm always looking for an opportunity to teach. I feel, I don't know if you're like that with your sisters, but I'm like that with mine. So in this teaching moment, I guess, what is something you would want to tell a younger activist? How would you want to encourage them in their activism? And what would you do to help them promote their own wellness and mental health?
Especially with this young generation right now, I really do think there's such a big heart for activism and for the issues that people go through. I think we see, I don't know, I mean, I know throughout history we've seen protests by younger generations, but it just seems to me that it's like younger and younger, and that college students are like thoroughly engaging in social issues. And I think that is so good. And I look at that, I admire that, and I want their fire to continue to burn throughout the rest of their life. and continue to be involved. And, when we see the students coming up now in our pro-life work, like we're always saying, find your place, find your niche, find what you can do in the pro-life movement to help continue the rest of your life. But when I see the way that they do activism now, I do get worried. I do get worried that they're reaching like higher stages of burnout than maybe before. I mean, maybe generations before us have also like really struggled with burnout, but maybe we can finally communicate that. I want to encourage them, like, if you want that fire to continue to be ignited and you want to continue to be an activist like the heroes that you've had before you, recognize what your place is in that fight. Be open to what the older generation tells you, and even us millennials, like, we don't think of ourselves as the older generation, but when you sit with Gen Z, we are clearly becoming an older generation. Be open to their advice, be open to their ideas, maintain the big heart that you have now, but have a solid head to be able to lead that heart, if that makes sense. And there's so many practical ways, and we're so I think because I think I see that burnout and that worry of mine that the fire is going to get quenched so much because of like this age of social media and instant gratification, instant information, and how we like have to react to things immediately without even having the full knowledge of it, instead of taking our time and like thoroughly writing something or thoroughly thinking about something. That's not everyone, but I think it's just evident and obvious in our culture. And I think that can just lead to burnout so fast, and you can just get caught up in it. And I think that in the end, that is really bad for the fire that's in your heart. So if people could just step back and take the advice of people before them, take those breaks from social media, turn off those notifications, and fill their cup and continue to dive in deeper than what's just in front of them. I think that then that fire for wanting to be involved in social issues and make big change can last so much longer, and they can implement it in so many other areas of their life.
Yeah, definitely. I like the image of it being a fire because I think maybe in my younger days I wanted to be like a bonfire. Like, look at me.
Yes.
I'm very visible and tall and cool. And I've recognized now I'm probably more like a lantern where it's like it's not as cool as the bonfire. And what I call my quiet activism now, I still have friends and family members who are pro-choice leaning, and to be able to have a conversation with them, or friends and family who have had abortions, and be able to walk with them in any kind of healing process or whatever part of their healing process they might be in. And of course, I still like know a lot of sibling survivors of abortion, like
Right.
me, people who have siblings who died by abortion, and like working it through little small groups with them is my quiet activism. I'm not doing anything flashy. Every once in a while, I'll be on something in front of the Supreme Court, but I'm not a very flashy activist anymore. And I've even considered, like, should I take off activist off my social media, because I don't
No.
feel quite like the same. But as you were saying too about the like constant updates and like that being a part of activism, it contributes to mental illness to know everything all the time, because our brains have like such a limited capacity to know things. And sometimes we don't really treat ourselves like we have that limited capacity. And
Right.
it's the like, get the word out, we need to spread awareness. And I understand that, and I have a great empathy for that, because that's, I mean, youth education, that's basically what we were doing,
Yeah.
awareness spreading. And of course, to some degree I still do that, and I think I will forever. I think this is to some degree my life's work, especially the sibling survivors part. But at the same time, like, if I am a lamp, there's oil to the lamp. You have to
Mhm.
keep filling the oil, and it's not flashy, and it's not nearly as big as it used to be. And maybe in some way it'll be big one day again, or when it's needed, when the time is appropriate. I, like you, also worry about young activists, people in my own family who care very deeply about things, which is good. And it's something I would always want someone to foster, that part of their heart that cares for other people, so because so many people don't care. But for those of us who care too much, and I feel like that's my people. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, Like my own family sometimes say, it's not that deep. That's like a phrase that and I'm like, oh, is it? Is it not? Like that's always my perception is that it.
Doesn't everyone think that way?
So for those of us that it is that deep, that we do care. Even today, all these years later, I was telling my story and I
Yeah.
talked about you. I always say your name and I always talk about how important it was to have your friendship in that time. Like it's not just the activist part, it's the human part, you know,
Yeah.
that as a human being, I was experiencing stuff that I don't know that I could ever do that again. Like I don't know if things could be revealed about my life in that painful of a way.
That
My heart could take
exposed of a way.
that
Yeah.
exposed of a way. Yeah, it was very vulnerable. And to
Mhm.
have
Yeah, it was quite a
community,
thing for me to witness.
my little word of advice, big sisterly advice would be get friends. Get friends
Yeah.
in your movement.
Yes.
You can't do it alone. And if you think you can, I would check again because change does happen in community and it's good to have co-activists.
Yeah.
And that was pivotal for me. I don't know if I could have done that same job. You know, it was a one position job. And I don't know that I could have done that without a
Right.
co-director.
I don't
I
know either.
literally physically can't imagine what that would be like. So I'm really thankful for you. You formed so much who I am as an activist. And I think it's reciprocal. I think we have, yeah, just this same heart. And even though there's so many parts of our lives that probably we wouldn't have been friends in those things, you're so
Uh-huh.
outdoorsy and and cool in that way. And you know, I
And
was
you're
like,
so Disney. At that time of my life, I was like, who is this chick who's got a scarf with Mickey Mouse on it? I don't understand. I don't know. I didn't know that an adult could be so into Disney. But then I
or
understood, and it's something that I found very endearing about you throughout our friendship.
yeah, I know. I remember that one pulse where you were saying, yeah, Krista and I, we always talk about how we wouldn't have been friends, but then I thought about it and we would have been friends because we loved
Yeah.
the Misfits
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
how we would have been friends. And I yeah, I
Same
remember
heart.
agreeing with that pretty profoundly whenever you said that in front of the kids. So
Aw.
yeah, so I'm just thankful and I'm thankful that you shared your expertise in lived experiences and activism and how to be more balanced. I'm trying to think. I just kind of want to end with like a funny story. I don't know why.
Oh
I'm just like I'm trying to
gosh.
think of like what there's so many years.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the one that we kind of mentioned briefly at the beginning, which is grandma's teeth. Like that would be forever to use maybe kind of a Gen Z term, Kristen Alex core.
Core. I love that. Krista Alex Core. Yes. I love that so much. It is. It is. Okay, it is grandma's teeth is Krista Alex Core. Here it is. So we went to DC together. It was our first trip ever together. We had never besides meeting at the interviews. I don't think we had ever talked another time in life.
No.
But then we were sharing a hotel for a weekend or a week. And then it was
Yeah.
Snowstorm Jonas that year too.
Yes. So
And that
for a
was my
very
first
long time.
time. I had never seen snow before and it was like 10 feet of snow.
I forgot
Um,
that.
and
That's
I was like, oh
crazy.
my gosh, and we're stuck here 2 extra days because of the snowstorm. First night there, we had so many mishaps, including both our phones dying because of the cold. And we used some German lady's phone at a bus stop. Find our way back to the hotel because we went grocery shopping. And that's when I found out.
Way out of our way, it seemed. Everything took forever.
eh,
The dead
Yeah,
phones.
I can't believe our phones died. That was the first time I realized that your phone could get cold and needed a sweater.
Same.
Um, and so our phones were dead. We got back to the hotel, I guess, and I'm unpacking because I like to unpack when I go to a hotel. And I think you were not looking at me, and I
I
just
was
said,
not. I was turned the other way. I was looking at my own suitcases.
and I said, "Oh, Lola's teeth." And what was your thought when you heard that?
I don't even know if I knew the term Lola at that point. Like, kind of. And then I think you said either Lola's teeth or grandma's teeth or one after the other. I don't know. And I heard that. I was like, I paused and I was like, what an interesting phrase. Like I thought she was just saying that as an expression. And then I was like, I'm gonna continue doing my clothes. And I was like, it was just a little too weird. And so I turned around and she's holding literal teeth in her hands. Oh, grandma's teeth. And I was like, why?
I think you were like, doesn't she need those? And then I was
then
like,
you said,
she died 3 years ago. And then you asked, like, why do you still have them?
yes,
And I was like,
why
oh, this was her luggage. And that was the first time we ever hung out. Besties ever since.
Yes, if I'm trying to remember the after of that. If I remember correctly, I think we just laughed
Yeah.
for a long time,
Yeah,
much
I think
like
we're pretty
we're doing
delirious.
now.
Yes.
After
It's
all
still
of
so
that.
funny.
Just the in my mind thinking, what a weird phrase. Why does she have her grandmother's teeth? Why does she purposely have her dead grandmother's teeth?
Man, if I were you, I would have felt really unsafe for like 45 seconds.
Yeah, for like a short period. We just got some leftover human.
Okay, it was her false teeth, to be
I
fair.
know.
Okay.
But in that moment of crisis, I just saw teeth. I don't think I'd ever seen dentures in real life. Is that what they're called?
Yeah. And they were just sitting in the palm of my hand.
And then we told that story at every single weekend retreat thereafter.
It's true. Just Alex
When we wanted
lore.
the kids to know who we were, we told that story.
This is a great story to understand the two of us. What person would be accepting of that? Only Alex. Anyone else would be like, checking out.
Yeah.
Get me out of here. Thank you for friendship and for
sticking it out.
all these years later. So good. Thank you for this interview on this podcast. It's weird to hit the record button on a conversation with an old friend, but I hope there will be many more episodes. I'm excited for your life and this new baby on the way.
Thank you.
It's just so cool to see us growing up.
Yes. I just want to echo the thank you for all the experience with you, all those late nights. I mean, you say that my friendship was formational. Watching you go through those experiences and being vulnerable with me and working things out, it's just scratching the surface to say that that was formational for me as well. To see you go through your own kind of mental health crisis and have to make decisions about that, I will always admire what you did going forward. And I know that when you left Louisiana Life, you had to pursue a lot of healing. I always thought of you and always remained here for you in the ways that I could. I just greatly admire everything that you went through and have always held that in my heart.
My friend. Well, thanks for listening, listeners. Give it up for Alex Seghers. Have a good night. Go potatoes.
Go potatoes.
Hang the up.